you are seeing. Let me go get background. Validate user, credit card, and check inventory. All these three are a session beans. And when we speak of entity beans, entity generally, what is the meaning of entity? In the terms of database, RDBMS, or concept of DBMS, a table is called an entity, right? Entity relationship diagram we used to say. So when you say entity beans, right? Session beans and entity beans, just look out the names. From the name you can derive the meaning basically. When we say entity, something persistence, a table in the DBMS is called a entity. So persistence, so entity beans are for persistence. Saving the user record into the database. What we used a entity beans, and entity beans for persistence and entity beans for approach was two types. What is it? CMP and BMP. Container managed persistence and a bean managed persistence. So when you say bean managed persistence, it is a programmatic. A programmer has to write a JDBC code to insert a record into the database, which is called programmatic. And CMP is container managed persistence, right? Your container is going to take care of completely the 2.0 container. So you are relying on the services of a container. And when you say programmatic, a developer has to write the JDBC code in the entity bean to insert a record or to read a record from a database, which is a entity bean. Now, how an entity bean works. So we do not have a concept of entity beans in the EJB, but just look at the diagram here. Entity beans are replaced by something called JPA, Java Persistence API. So EJB, so here basically in the EJB 3.0 you have a session bean and a message driven bean. Session beans, what exactly you are trying to do? Session beans, basically a business logic, and message driven bean, and third one is entity bean. Means entity bean, earlier we had two kinds, a CMP and a BMP using JDBC code. So we do not have no more JDBC code, and we know that object ORM frameworks, ORM, object relational mapping frameworks like Hibernate, JPA, Toplink, they are getting popular. And EJB 3, they came with a Sun Microsystem has come with their own framework, that is Java Persistence API. Once again, JPA is notation based. Once again, it is a notation based, and it is used to store the records into the database. So entity concept is replaced by the JPA. So we focused on session bean and message driven. So what we have again, JPA here, entity by JPA, and once again JPAs are notation based. Perfect. Now third one is a message driven bean. Once again there were changes. Message driven beans, and message driven beans is nothing but EJB can communicate with a JMS. EJB can be communicated with the JMS. Once again we have annotations over here, and if you look at the three names in the EJB, session, what is the meaning of session? We know that a session is a very short lifespan. Session, generally we say a session, 2-hour session or 3-hour session. So the name session bean came like, let me refer back the diagrams. Yep, is it? Yep, session bean, if you look out, yep, session bean, the name derived from a session. When we say session, a scope is very much little. Like if you look at the credit card, you don't require any persistence. The credit card verification is done, then you don't require a session. You don't require a session once the credit card verification is done, right? Valid user, credit card, and check inventory. Three things we have. So session is a short-lived object. So the name is derived based upon the business, what exactly you require. You require the object, you don't want to be persistent. The object should be for a few minutes or for a few hours, and then the object should be destroyed. Then it is called a session bean. And entity bean, the terminology derived from the database table, and the same message driven beans. So a asynchronous EJB might require a asynchronous communication with the backend systems, right? Let me show you what is a business scenario for a message driven bean. Let us see business scenarios. So now you're clear. And once again guys, you have a few more differences, but when you do practical you will come through one by one. Here we have basically EJB 3.0. Two the powerful features of EJB 3.0 is one is a POJO based beans and configuration using annotations, and the third powerful feature is it uses something called GPA. So what we're discussing, so basically keeping EJB 3.0 in mind is one is the annotation, second one is the POJO based beans, and the third powerful feature is entity beans are replaced by JPA, right? Means you have a JPA, that is the third powerful feature of EJB 3.0. And one more feature is EJB can be exposed as web services, right? EJB can be exposed as a web service, can be exposed as a web service. So everywhere today we see a web service. So everything is being converted into a web service. Whatever the code you are creating, you need to have a extension, like one more interface. Whatever the code you are creating, it should have an interface. If you look out today, whatever the applications are created, you got iPad and Apple iPhones or Android. So all the Facebook, Gmail, YouTube, all these guys are creating a widgets for the smartphones. Widgets, since you can access them by using a browser, but still they have started. These companies like Google, YouTube, blah blah. So many applications are there because earlier they were only in the browser-based application, but the smartphones came into the market and slowly they have created a widgets for Android and the iPads and the iPhones. In the same way, what exactly happened today? If you look out, the web services became popular. So today, everything you can expose as a web service, even your normal programs, everything they are exposed as a web service. Say the same thing with the EJB. EJB has provided this mechanism where the session beans can be exposed as any bean can be exposed as a web service. So a separate interface, as a separate interface, you can invoke a EJB as a web service. Need not to be you have a servlet program. Means earlier in the 2.0, what is a client for EJB, right? A servlet program, servlet or a stress program. But for when you say EJB can be exposed as a web service, means a EJB program can be invoked from a JSP, from a Flex, or from a .NET. This makes a difference, right? EJB can be exposed as a web service. These are the basically differences between 2.0 and 3.0. Fine. Now let us review bean use cases. What is the meaning of use cases? I have a session bean, entity bean, and a message driven bean. So could you tell me, we need to know what are the use cases of a session bean, entity bean, and a message driven. A session bean basically used might be for a user validation, credit card validation, or a inventory validation. You might be using a simple session bean, right? So as told, there are two kinds of session beans. What is the one? Stateless session bean and the second one is a stateful session bean. So a stateless session bean might be required where you don't want your session to be tracked, right? It could be only a credit card verification, only credit card, a normal single standalone process where you require a stateless session bean. And a stateful session bean is, you might be for shopping application, you might be developing a shopping application or order fulfillment where you want to track. So in that case you require a stateful session beans. Means you are trying to invoke the different beans when you're doing a kind of transaction. We know that what session beans does not save any state. We know that session beans does not save any state, means each request it treats as a independent request. Each request is an independent request, but somehow you might have a business scenario, you might have a use case for a shopping application. In the shopping application, the first step is, what is the first step? You required the user might give a order. In the second step, the user might give the address details, and in the third, it might give a shipping details, and the fourth step it might give a credit card details. If credit card details are success, then process the shipment. So in this kind of shopping application or any kind of order fulfillment, you require data to be stored on the server temporarily till the order is fulfilled. Means we know that today there are many business processes where it require the input from the user in various session, and this data has to be saved temporarily on the server to fulfill the order. So for that you require a stateful session bean. And now let's come to the stateless session bean. When you speak of stateless session bean, each request is different and you don't require anything to be stored on the server, right? So basic scenarios for the session beans are validate user, and credit card verification, inventory check. Basically all this you require a session beans. And entity beans is something where you want to store the data into the database, right? Now assume that, basically let me take flight booking, right? Flight booking. So if I want to do the flight booking, what are the steps for a flight booking? First is the browse, second is select flight, and the third one is select flight, verify address, take address details, and fourth might be passport details. Few of the companies might require. And fourth one is, if it is success, then what you require a credit card details, right?